Good morning. I think it's still morning for most attendees at this webinar. My name is Angela Brown, and I am a solutions architect for the US and Canada distribution team here at Q-SYS. And I'm here to talk to everybody today about the Q-SYS NVM series of products and give you an introduction to not only the products, but some software updates that have come along with the products. And some hardware updates as well. So giving you guys all the information and hopefully giving you a good basis of information to get started with doing some design work. And let's kind of dig into it here. Let's get going. First things first, we're going to talk a little bit about the NV series. You can't really talk about NVM without talking about our existing products. And then we're going to talk about the two different protocols we're using, Shift and MediaCast. We'll review the hardware, give you some information off the spec sheet. Then we're going to actually talk about the new components, inventory items, and software that's in Q-SYS Designer 10.4. And then if we have time, last time I did this, we actually ran out of time to look at some systems. We'll talk about some systems at scale and doing this at bigger and bigger scales. And we have some sample systems to share with you. Last time I did this, we didn't quite have enough time for the sample systems, but I think we got through all the rest of the information. So let's dig in and get going. For us, I think the big thing to start out with is why NVM? Why did we release this product? Let's talk through some of those things. To do that, we really need to start with the NV series. The NV series endpoints up until this year were our video endpoints. And we had three models. We had the NV21, the NV32, and the NV1. We released these, I think I always like to talk about Q-SYS and Q-SYS sort of growing up in the audio world as opposed to growing up in the video world. But because we grew up in the audio world, we really realized after a certain point that if we didn't have video and we couldn't deploy an entire ecosystem, then we were really missing a big component to where we wanted to go and to being that full stack AV platform. So the NV series, these are the four tenets it was built on. We wanted it flexible, scalable. We wanted to use Shift, which was the codec, and we'll talk about that in a minute here. We wanted integrated AV bridging. This was predominantly geared towards conferencing applications when we first sort of started down the road to video. And then we wanted to make sure that we could integrate these parts and pieces into Q-SYS Designer software and into our full platform. We didn't want them to be another piece of software. We didn't want to have to go into four other things to actually bring these into the ecosystem. So fully incorporated into our ecosystem. Those three products we just talked about on the NV32. The NV32H, still one of my favorite parts that Q-SYS makes in the world of conferencing especially. It can be a core, 3 input, 2 output HDMI switcher, has integrated AV bridging. So lots of capabilities in a really small box. Requires PoE++. As we all know, that 90 watts can be sometimes expensive to provide, but for what you get, this is kind of the Swiss Army knife of AV boxes and video boxes. Then we have the NV21 that can be an encoder or a decoder, also has integrated AV bridging, also PoE++, and really allows you to have the ability to do sort of single cable connections for laptops. You can inject power to power a laptop as well. So kind of a great solution for lecterns and behind displays and those sorts of things. And then we have our NV1 wall plate, which is a wall plate encoder. It is what it is. It is a useful tool when you need it, and really kind of a good addition to the NV series of products. All of the NV products use Shift as the codec, so the video codec. Shift is a proprietary codec, but it has a couple of things that it does really well. One, it actually optimizes the compression algorithm. So it's an adaptive algorithm based on the content that you're putting through it. So it can expand for, say you're playing a movie or really fast video clips. Or if you're just doing slides like I'm doing today, it can really compress that even more. And it really gives a nice ability to have low latency video over a single gigabit network port, and can do 4K 60, 444, which I think in today's market is pretty much a requirement. And then, obviously it is built into our platform. However, there are a couple of things that Shift does that make it a little bit more, I would say, uh, raise some obstacles for massive deployments, for running really big projects such as 300 endpoints. Um, One of those is Shift itself, because it's an adaptive algorithm, it actually takes a lot of processing power. That's why we're running, PoE++ to these boxes. They need the power. Um, and that because of that processing power that's required there, they can get a little bit expensive. So we recognized and have been working on for some time the need for us to have products that actually allow us to provide something that's a little bit more scalable. Maybe not as feature rich. Maybe we just need one input or one output, and allow us to sort of expand past the conference room application and into bigger and bigger spaces. So that is where the NVM series comes in. We wanted a couple of things. We have the NV series, and you can see those four tenets that they're built on. The NVM, we sort of changed our focus just a little bit with that. We wanted to be able to scale quickly and easily. We wanted to be able to deploy faster, design natively, and really make it so that it becomes a holistic full stack AV platform. You'll hear us at Q-SYS say full stack AV platform a lot. They're not just words to us. We really do want it to be this holistic, all-encompassing platform. And of course, we want it to be Q-SYS. So talking about these three things in a little bit more detail, scaling the Q-SYS video experiences, I think this is a really big one. It's one thing to be able to deploy a lot of endpoints, but it's another thing to be able to deploy a lot of endpoints quickly and consistently. So, for us, I think that's a pretty big thing. For that, we actually went away from Shift for our NVM. That's why there's the little M at the end of that. So Network Video MediaCast. For this, we're actually leveraging MediaCast. So MediaCast, built around industry standard codec. It's very network efficient. It allows for a little bit more cost-effective scaling than Shift does. And the other part of that for us, and the other thing that made this really an applicable technology to incorporate with our video products, is we're already using them for our AV bridging and Q-SYS camera infrastructure. Design native, deploy faster. We're going to talk about this a lot when we get into the software. You'll see that we've added a lot of tools in 10.4, in Q-SYS Designer 10.4, that will allow you to be able to deploy and deploy at scale. I really think this is a pretty important feature, and we're going to spend some time on it here this morning. And then video built inside a platform. These two really dovetail together, right? We want the platform to be the controlling entity. And one of the things that I've seen Q-SYS start doing in the last year or so is embedding some of these design softwares and configuration softwares within Q-SYS Designer, so that you can stay native inside the platform and not have to have, say, a separate piece of software to build a deployment. So the other side of this for us is really making sure that it's cost effective, really making sure how to deliver video at a scale that I think Q-SYS hasn't done before. We really have nailed that conference market, and I think getting into boxes that have maybe less I/O or different I/O, maybe some less expansive features, and a lot easier to deploy, a lot easier to get in and out of places in terms of physically, so a little bit smaller, and just getting in and out of the software without having it be this massive programming cost. So that's why we have NVM. So now we're going to sort of talk about the two boxes that we have available. And I really like to call it like 2.5 boxes because one of the boxes can be upgraded. So it really is effectively three configurations that you can have for the hardware. So let's start with the encoder. We have the NVM 302E, and then we have the NVM E2. It is the same box. The E2 is simply a license for a second stream. So working our way through this, I'm going to talk through all the I/O here. I think it's important to know. There are two HDMI inputs. Both of those inputs can support up to 4K 6444. It is a media cast encoder, so we are no longer in the world of shift. We have a LAN port. We'll talk about the PoE requirements here on the next slide. HID routing and AV bridging are coming down the line. We're trying to figure out ways to make them very efficient and scalable, and you can expect those in the future. They're under development. I'm pretty excited about that personally. And then we actually have added RS-232 and IR controls. Knowing full well that this may not always be a conference application, and it may not always be a commercial display or a commercial box that we're talking to, we've given a lot of flexibility for being able to control devices externally to the NVM 302. So then the NVM E2 is a bundle that includes a second license. And yes, I know I said the dirty L word, but it gives you a license so that you can actually do two streams out of one of the encoders. Very much like the way you could with one of the NV32s or the NV21, this allows you to have that second stream. There is one slight resolution change when you go to the two-stream bundle. It is 4K 30. It's still 444 color space and sample rate, but it is 4K 30. So in order to keep us at that 1 gigabit network port, we had to change the resolution just a little bit when you go to dual stream. So moving on from our box, this is just an excerpt from the spec sheet for the encoder. Some things to pay attention to. This box can run on PoE Plus or PoE++. So it can actually run on type 2 class 4, which is, I think the actual spec is 30 watts. But it is really nice that you don't actually have to be putting in PoE++ switches, especially if you're, again, trying to, say, do an entire casino. The size of the box is about, I haven't actually put them one on top of another, but they're so darn close. The box is about the same size as our NV21. And there is a rack kit that allows you to rack two side by side. The fun thing is that you can actually share that rack kit with the NV21. So they are compatible with each other. Again, they are so close in size, it's not even funny. And then you can just see what we support HDMI 2.0 and HDCP 2.3 and 1.4. We do allow for 8 channels of audio, but it is PCM audio. So not surround sound, no surround sound encoding or decoding, but it does give you 8 channels of audio that you can actually pull out and extract from the encoder. All right. Getting into the decoder. Decoder is just as simple a box. It has a little bit less in terms of RS-232 and IR, mostly because it's a single HDMI output. And the HDMI output is 4K 6444. Brian, I see your question. I'm just going to finish my thought, and then I'll answer your question. And then, it will decode up to 4K 6444 stream as well. It will decode, if you're streaming dual stream and at 4K 30, you can actually decode this at 4K 3444 as well. And we're going to answer Brian's question here. Is the dual stream encoder limited to 4K 30 if only using one stream? That's a great question, Brian. I would bet that as long as you're not activating the second stream, you can run 4K 6444. But as soon as you actually start encoding that second stream, it's going to drop down. All right. Moving on to the specs of the decoder. The decoder is PoE plus and no option for PoE plus plus. Same size. The encoder and the decoder are they are identical in size. So they can also be included in your rack mount kits and your rack mount accessory, and then all of the same specs. You can take a look. So to sort of sum up what we're looking at between our two NV series, our NVMs and our NV series, so call it our entire video solution or video suite of products. This is a really nice little comparison that I like to share with everybody, so you can sort of see the differences between how they're running and how they operate and feature sets. I'm not going to read all the things out loud to you. You guys can all read, I hope. And then talking about intercompatibility, Martin, I'll answer your question here in just a second. Talking about intercompatibility is a pretty big thing, because why would we have two different encoders and decoders if we can't actually have them working together? Well, we've actually, with the release of 10.4, allowed the NV32 and the NV21s to go into MediaCast mode. So if they go into MediaCast mode, you can actually make an NV21 a MediaCast encoder, or an NV32 a MediaCast encoder. There is one slight difference, which is that the only resolution that's available for that is 1080p 30. But that does allow you to incorporate some AV bridging and to really start to merge these into a single ecosystem instead of going, oh, I'm going to use the NV over here and I'm going to use the NVM over here. I've started to see some fun deployments where we've got an NV21 in a lectern, but at all the display devices, including, say, even a confidence monitor, we have NVM decoders. So there is starting to be some good compatibility. I really feel like this is going to increase over time, that as we figure out ways to reconfigure the NV32 and the NV21 to be compatible with the system, this is going to really merge into one big ecosystem, which I think is personally pretty exciting to me. I think of this and I sort of, the back of my mind goes, man, about time. This is awesome. All right, couple of questions. Any benefit of using 2.5 gigabit LAN on these products versus 1 gigabit? We're actually using 2.5 gigabit LAN ports on a lot of products. You would be surprised at the number of products have that. Last I checked, the NV21 actually has a 2.5 gigabit LAN port. I think that it's future expansion. Right now, we're not using it. Right now, we are sending 1 gigabit and we are limiting that port to 1 gigabit. But I do feel like it opens up more capability in the future. And I really like that we're sort of future-proofing the box. Let's see, Brad. Will NVM be able to ingest from Q-SYS cameras as they share codec type now? Yes, they absolutely can. I actually have tested that. I've taken a camera, put it into my ecosystem, and displayed it through an NVM decoder, no problem at all. They are really interchangeable. The only thing that I find that we are missing, that doesn't really travel through that, the MediaCast portion of this is you don't have the camera control. Something like where with NDI, you have the camera control sort of in the signal with the video, but we can actually intermix the cameras and the NVM boxes now. It's like I said, it's pretty exciting stuff. All right. Getting back to it. And then I think this is sort of the last slide on the hardware. I think that leading into the software review of this is really important to understand that we released two boxes, right? We've got an encoder and a decoder. But what we've really done on the software side is what's going to start driving this into a lot of fun deployments, a lot of scalable deployments, a lot of bigger deployments without having to do a whole lot of extra programming and coding. So talking about that with the software, we're actually going to talk about inventories that's been added into the schematic elements library, inventory that's been added into the actual inventory, and then the embedded pieces of software that are dedicated to the NVM platform. So first things first, this slide is up there just to be super clear about the fact that it is Q-SYS Designer 10.4 and later, because 10.4.1 was released last week. 10.4 and later is what supports NVM products. There's no need to use multiple programs to design your system. The new tools are no different than any of the tools that are built into Q-SYS Designer already. And again, we're gonna talk through all of those things here in the next, I want to say 10 or 15 minutes. All right, starting in 10.4, the MediaCast router, the original MediaCast router that's been in Q-SYS Designer for quite a while now, and has been used to route all of our cameras, and you do AV bridging. The original MediaCast router has now been renamed the camera router. And then the MediaCast router is a completely new component with completely new features. So very important to know. If you have a design that you've built before 10.4 and you open it in 10.4 or 10.4.1, any MediaCast router that you have will automatically be migrated and relabeled as a camera router. It won't break anything. Your code name shouldn't change. Your functionality shouldn't change. But just know if you open up a file that, say, had ACPR in it that was built in 9.4 or 9.6 or 9.10, all of a sudden when you open that file in 10.4, your MediaCast router will be called a camera router. And then we have this new MediaCast router. It's a pretty big improvement and some things that I think most of us have been asking for quite some time are finally realized. This is a really good chart. This chart is in our help file. If you actually just go into the help file for the camera router or the MediaCast router, we have this. Pay attention. This may change over time. I think that the new MediaCast router is still under development, and there's some things that may actually change over time with that. But we're gonna walk through some of these differences here. The camera router works with all our Q-SYS cameras, just like it always has. It works with the MV32. Remember, you can actually run a MediaCast output to an MV32. Allows any USB bridging. So any device that has USB bridging, our touch panels, our cores, our NV series boxes. What it will not support is NVM, encoders, decoders, or displays. And you can't cascade in or out of the camera routers. So still the same old MediaCast router that you know and love, no changes really to that functionality, just getting renamed and making some space for the new MediaCast router. The next thing we have is the new MediaCast router. Still works with all the network cameras, still works with the MV32 HDMI I/O. It works with other MediaCast routers. In other words, you can cascade them together. You can have MediaCast routers coming into MediaCast routers, going out to other MediaCast routers, which is really a big plus for us. Allows for a lot of functionality and allows for a lot of scale, especially when we get into using this for NVM products. Then we also can still do USB bridging. What we lose is the UVC control sort of pass-through that the camera router did, still does actually. But basically, if you have an AV bridge and you have 4 PTZ cameras, the AV bridge, depending on which camera is routed to it through the camera router, that AV bridging camera controls will control the various cameras. And then so some of those camera controls and camera pass-throughs are not capable yet, but stay tuned. I think that, like I said, a lot of these features are going to be rolled out, especially when the development on the AV bridging for the NVM boxes becomes available. So you can take a look at this chart. And again, this chart is in the help file. If you ever want to go see it again, you can just go into our help file and look for the camera router or the MediaCast router. All right, so that's one of our new components. The next new component that we have is called the NVM proxy. The NVM proxy is really a virtual control management device. It's a nice way to be able to control devices, and there's a lot of device control built in, like display controls. I want to say satellite receiver controls, those types of standard controls. Like in my brain, I'm always thinking of like a sports bar that has like 30 TVs and a bunch of satellite receivers. But basically, it's control management. It's allowing you to do control at scale and making it so that you don't necessarily have to um, write every single control code or every single piece of control. You can group controls together. So say if you have a system where you have three displays and the three displays are all connected to satellite receivers. If you want to group those three displays together and have them viewing the same input or the same, say, DirecTV receiver, then the controls should sort of group themselves together too. So if you go to change the channel for one of those TVs, it'll change it for all three TVs. There's a lot of that built into the proxy. I think personally, I've had some time to play around with the proxy, and I don't think I've really explored everything that it can do just yet. But I think it's really this method of scaling up the controls along with scaling up the video routing. We can't leave the control component of this behind when we start trying to scale and group inputs and outputs and matrices together. We have to sort of keep those control components part of the system to scale ourselves up. One of the other really sort of nice things about this is it's a single control component where you can control as many devices as you want to control, as many sources, as many displays as you want. And it's really, there's no programming required. It's kind of like taking an entire zone or space and giving yourself a single TV remote. You can do all of that through this proxy. The other sort of fun thing is there's no programming. You're not writing a bunch of scripts to say, if these three displays are controlled, then do these control groupings together. The proxy does all that for you. It can dynamically change what it can control in the video system based on what you want it to do. So I always sort of stop and think, imagine creating a UCI that's dynamic and dynamically changing what's being controlled without having to write a lot of layers or write any complicated Lewis scripts or UCI scripts or doing all of that complex programming. Instead, you can really just grab some buttons out of the NVM proxy, get them onto your UCI, and as you change groupings and routings, the proxy will dynamically change its control points. So really a great new add to our inventory. And I'll be honest, I'm still learning about this. I'm still sort of understanding what it can do. My family's pretty mad at me because right now every single TV in the building or in my house is attached to an NVM, and we're playing around with some of the things that the proxy can do. And I'm pretty excited for what it does for scaling up control points. All right, so then we're going to get to inventory, the actual physical inventory, so inputs and outputs in the box, right? We've added three new components to the inventory. So we have the 302D for decoder, the 302E for encoder, and then a routing group. And we're going to talk about the routing groups and sort of what the routing groups are doing. Basically, these three components have been added to the inventory, but we've also sort of changed the way the encoder and decoder component operate and some of the things that are included in them from the NV32 and the NV21. So one of the things that is worth talking about now, and we're going to get into the routing groups in a little bit more detail. It's an inventory component that's a virtual matrix. So every routing group that you put in is basically a matrix video switcher. I wanted to say mixer, but you know what I mean. It gives you source selection, source control, audio output routing, MediaCast I/O for all the NVM boxes assigned to the group, and we'll talk about how that works. And then really without requiring a whole lot of things to be put into the schematic. It's It's really a nice way of grouping things together. One really important point is, say I have an encoder, and I want that encoder to be available to all my output groups, but then I have 6 or 7 different sets of displays in a space. You can add NVM encoders and decoders to multiple routing groups, which all of a sudden opens up a whole world of possibilities in terms of how you want to program and how you want your system to operate. All right, first things first though, let's talk about the decoder and encoder components. First things first, the HDMI AV display and HDMI AV sources are now embedded in the inventory items. So they're already attached to each encoder and decoder. So if you look at what I've got here, where I have a source, an encoder going to a decoder and a display, you'll notice there's no wiring to the source of the display because they're actually inherently part of the inventory item. We realized that every time you put in an encoder, you need a source. Every time you put in a decoder, you need a display. So we've lumped those together and built them in for you, which saves you a lot of time and hassle in terms of programming. If you don't even want to put the source and the display into your file, you can still technically route from point A to point B without them. The next feature that I really like for this is friendly names have actually been included in all of these components. So if I want to actually give an output a friendly name like, oh, that's the display over the bar, or an encoder that's satellite receiver 1 or DirecTV box 1. You can give them friendly names, and those friendly names follow all the way through as you make routing changes within your routing group or between your routing groups. So once you've given something a friendly name, that friendly name sort of propagates everywhere, which includes your UCI. So if you give it a friendly name and you want to use the friendly name on the UCI, absolutely can. It's simple and easy, just drag and drop. And then just to be aware, the other thing that we've included is the preview streams are all there. You don't have to turn them on. You don't have to go into properties and say yes or no to them. Every input and output includes a preview stream, and you can see the resolution there on the slide. So lots of built-in features. The AV display and sources being included, I hope somebody retroactively puts those into the inventory items for the MV32 and the MV21. That would be glorious. Okay, so then let's talk about our routing groups. So you can see that I've got 4 encoders in this example here, and I've got 5 decoders. And basically, every one of those decoders needs every one of the sources in order to be able to display them. So I've routed, and I've very nicely color-coded this. I've routed those things to each of the decoders. So decoder 3 can view any one of sources 1 through 4. This is pretty standard matrix wiring that you would do with the NV series and in Q-SYS Designer. And what that gives you, all the capabilities are still there, but what we've added to this is this routing group. And the routing group basically means that you put all those encoders in the routing group, you put all those decoders in the routing group, and that matrix that I've created on the left-hand side of this slide is automatically created for you. So you don't have to do anything beyond add all those devices into the routing group. So video sources are available. All of the sources are available at every display. Video sources can be grouped together and selected in groups, which is actually an improvement over doing it the way that I have on the left here, that you can say, I want decoders 2 and 4 to always get source 1, and I want 1, 3, and 5 to have source 4. You can group them together, so you don't have to individually do any of that cross-point routing, which is kind of fun. And as you add things to a routing group, they're automatically placed in all the selector lists. And again, those selector lists are kind of fun things that you can put on your UCI and a little bit of formatting, and off you go to the races. So talking about the routing groups, I'm gonna actually show you guys that here in a little bit, but before we get into me switching over to Q-SYS Designer, We actually have to talk about the last two things that have been added as part of 10.4 and later. So under a tools menu in Q-SYS Designer, you'll now see an NVM option. And if you highlight over that, you'll see two pieces of software. You'll see NVM Designer and NVM Manager. These are embedded software packages that are part of Q-SYS Designer. No separate download. If you install Q-SYS Designer 10.4 or later, they're there. They've just shown up and they're ready for you to use. So you don't have to really add or change anything to get into them. And let's talk about what these two things are. So first things first, we have Designer. Designer is really meant for offline configuration. So pre-programming, say you're back in the shop and you're laying out all your inputs and outputs and building all your routing groups and building your program. That's what NVM Designer is a tool for. And then we have NVM Manager. Manager, it's the runtime management tool. I think that NVM Manager has a couple of really nice features, and we're gonna talk about those here in just a couple of minutes. So NVM Designer, it allows you to create routing groups. It allows you to set up all your audio routing and how you want your audio routing to work. And then it allows you to add all of your encoders and decoders, and again, place them in routing groups as you see fit. So let's get into that part of this. Talking about deploying at scale is really a conversation about how to use these pieces of software. But I want to start by just sort of demonstrating that if you don't want to use the software, if you don't want things to be easy, and you want to do it the hard way, and you want to go through and set everything in properties all by yourself, you can do that. They're not required for you to use. They're there for you to use as a tool that allows you to make your programming faster and scalable. So let's talk about that. So we're going to talk about if we did this manually. And I'm just going to sort of show you that you can, in fact, add those things if you want to. I've got Q-SYS Designer here in front of me, and I'm going to go into my inventory, and I'm going to go to video, and I'm going to add, let's add 2 routing groups, and I'll say 6 decoders and 2 encoders. So I can add everything manually. And if I want an encoder, let's just take this encoder, and I want it to be in routing group 1, I can put it in routing group 1, and I can do that in properties. So you can do all of this if you really, like I like to say, you can do it the hard way if you want. But that is something that if you have to make a quick change or you have to get in and do something, on the fly, you can do it using Q-SYS Designer natively. This is also where you can say, oh, I have the E2 instead of the E1. I have the 2-stream version of the encoder. And you can see that you get your second HDMI source actually appears there. So you can do all of this natively with properties. And we're going to actually delete a bunch of these things because we're going to do the same thing using NVM Designer. So let's take a look. So you can do all of that, or you can actually use NVM Designer. So NVM Designer, as you add things to routing groups and inventory, it will add them to the inventory. And just to reiterate, you have to do this offline because we're changing inventory items and we're changing properties. And as everybody knows, if you've been through our level 1 class, if you change the inventory or you change the properties of devices, you have to push your file. So we're making setup and configuration changes with NVM Designer, which is why NVM Designer is the software package that's used when you're offline. So think of this as building your file. So we're gonna take a quick look at this here. You can see it's a pretty simple software, and I'm gonna show you sort of real time, but just making that point a couple of times about this is offline configuration only. Because after you've made all these properties and inventory changes, you would have to push the file into the core. All right, so let's take a look at that. Tools, NVM, NVM Designer. So it looks a lot like what we just pulled up. And if you go into edit mode, and we're going to add new, and I'm going to say I want to have, um, let's do that same two routing groups. So there's our two routing groups. Let's just say room. So I can change the base name, and you'll see that I changed that. And I can just say, you know, bar area, why not? So you can set the location. That does set the location in the properties and in your inventory. So as you're actually adding these routing groups, be very, very specific about that because it'll organize your inventory for you. How many MediaCast inputs do I want? We're just going to give it some information here. So we've created the MediaCast, the routing groups. And now I can say how many encoders do I want in each routing group. And you can see in our two rooms here that we've added an encoder and a decoder. So if I say I want to have two encoders, I now have two encoders in routing group 1 and two encoders in routing group 2. And I can say we want to have these be, and we're now calling them DirecTV. So you can see I have DirecTVs 1 through 4. And they're also located in the bar area. And then we have decoders. We'll give ourselves a couple of MediaCast inputs there. And we're going to give ourselves, let's say, 6. And we're going to call these display. So you'll see I have my DirecTV receivers, my displays. I have 4 encoders, 12 decoders, 2 routing groups. And once I create this, you'll actually see all of my inventory. And all of my inventory is in locations. So if I wanted to change it, but say, okay, my 2 DirecTV receivers are actually in the rack, I can still change those and move them. I can still update the properties. This is just a tool that allows you to get really quick, really granular, and really fast systems and matrix video mixing configured quickly. All right, let's get back to this and take a look at NVM Manager. I'm not online with a system, so it's going to be a little bit harder for me to show you NVM Manager, but I can sort of describe what it's doing. One of the best things that it allows you to do is it allows you to manage the devices. And basically, if you open up the component in Q-SYS Designer, all of the things that you can change. So like you can hot plug trigger the your HDMI. You can disable HDMI, you can put a display into sleep mode, you can change the AV input on a display or the whatever source you want to view. A lot of those things that you would in Q-SYS Designer be doing on a component by component basis, what NVM Manager allows you to do is to do those in groups. So say I wanted to take 4 of my encoders, I can select all 4, and then I can make a change that actually affects all 4 of them at the same time, which is why you have sort of these checkboxes. I could say the word checkbox off on the left-hand side of NVM Manager. So it allows you to sort of manage them in bulk. So rather than having to find the component, open up the component in Q-SYS Designer while you're running emulation mode or live on the core, you can do it in NVM Manager in sort of a list style format that allows you to sort of see all those devices at the same time and say change the name. So say I wanted to change the friendly names on all of them, you could do that in just this one list rather than having to go in component by component and change those names. So that's where NVM Manager gives you a lot of economies of scale that you may or may not normally have in Q-SYS Designer. You can do a lot of this in emulation mode, which is kind of a fun thing to be able to do. Emulation mode would allow you to set all your friendly names. So if you know it's going to be, the DirecTV receiver that's always on ESPN, we'll set the friendly name to ESPN. And then when they go to their touch panel and operate this, they can go, oh, I want that display to show ESPN, and they just click that button. So lots of things that you can do in NVM Manager. You can still go in and manually do it all. in every single component. This just lists all your NVM components in one place and gives you all of those settings in one easy table that you can get into fast and make those changes quicker. All right, so we actually have a few minutes to talk about some systems. We're going to talk first about a casino. This is probably going to be a pretty common application for the NVM boxes. Some things that I like to add to this, I mean, you can see the TV tuner is going into the NVM 302E. You have standard amplifiers, standard QLAN devices, you've got a core, you've got a network switch, and then you've got all of the 302Ds all around the casino floor for all your decoders. I think this would be a pretty typical application and one that I would really look for NVM to manage instead of our NV series. And if you look, I mean, there's what, 5, 10, 15, 20 displays, and you can manage all that in some small groups, and maybe 3 routing groups, maybe 4 routing groups. Maybe you want to set this up so that the first display in each of these video walls always shows the same thing. So put those 4 displays into a group together. And all of a sudden you're managing this at the scale of, instead of 20 displays and dealing with everything individually, you're managing this system as, oh, I want that first display to have source 1, or that first display to have source 2. And it changes all 4 because it's doing that matrix video switching for you in the routing group. So very similar layout would also be that same casino, but in a race and sports book. Same sort of a thing. I mean, the one thing I will say, and I'm surprised I haven't gotten the question yet, I got it the last time I did this webinar, is we really will have, we don't have any capability right now to do windowing or video wall processing. And I say right now because I'm hoping that it's a feature that's under development, and I'm hoping it's something that comes along soon because it even opens up the capacity of the NVM even further. But in a recent sportsbook, most of the time you actually have an individual image on each one of those displays because you're showing, say, all 12 of the horse tracks in the US or all, 15 different sporting events all simultaneously. So you do need that matrix routing, and NVM's a really good application for that. If anyone attended InfoComm this year, we were doing exactly that in our race and sportsbook. Very appropriate that it was held in Vegas, I think. And we were doing exactly that. We had a bunch of encoders in a rack, and then we had a decoder behind every single display, and we were able to mix and match them as we needed to based on how we had programmed the routing groups. All right, so then we get to the restaurant or sports bar. I think this is actually a really good application for Q-SYS. I think it is because it actually takes into account there's a lot of other things that go on in restaurants or in sports bars. A lot of times you have entertainment. A lot of times you have paging that you need. So say you're paging for, hey, so-and-so party of 2, your table's ready. You have a lot of touch points for the staff to be able to control the system and to be able to set up and run different events. Sometimes it's a football game. Sometimes it's a person standing on a stage with a guitar singing. And I think that this is a really good application for Q-SYS because you can mix and match the NVM with NV as you see fit. So if you need a wall plate input for somebody to plug a laptop in, so say during the day, the sports bar might have a corporate event come in there or a meeting take place, you can have that capability. Or you can have, a rack full of TV tuners that are all going into our NVM 302s, or the encoder box, and maybe set up as dual encoders, dual streams. So there's a lot of flexibility, and I think when you start understanding that this is an entire ecosystem, that we want the audio to be tied in with the video, to be tied in with paging, with control, even with lighting. There could be stage lighting as part of this restaurant and bar that if they go into the mode where there's somebody on stage with a microphone singing, that the lighting accommodates that you turn on lights, the spotlights for them. A sample design for, oh, you're going to have to actually give me a little bit more information. Can you show a sample design for this scenario? Which scenario? I feel like I've been talking about a lot of scenarios. So give me a little bit more specifics there and I'll answer your question. Um, and then really, people don't think about this, but we like to have this slide here, this courtroom slide here, to show that, not every AV system out there in the world requires conferencing. And oh, the live band example. Yes, I will get back to that. I will get back to you. Hold on just a second. Thank you. Um, and this is a good situation um, where we can mix and match, where you might have an MV32 or an MV21 because you do have conferencing in a courtroom because you might have a remote attendee, but at the same time you might have a panel of people where you need like 12 little displays. And I think there's a lot of flexibility with the NVM product, especially because the NVM product is really part of our ecosystem that allows you to think about and use us in terms of incorporating all of our products in one cohesive system. So the live band example, I actually like to think that this restaurant and sports bar actually is that example. This little half moon shape over on the right, to me is a stage, or it could be a big LED wall, and then you've got the PL26s there. You've got a video wall on the other side of the room, and you've got, so if I had sporting events happening on the left-hand side of the room, I could have the audio set up one direction. I could have these DC26s and the subs pushing audio from left to right, basically. And if we switch over to the right-hand side, which to me would be where like this little bandstand would be, you can turn off those speakers on the left, turn on those two PLDC26s, so then the audio is sort of going from right to left. And if you need to route different video, or say you have one of our Q-SYS cameras in this system, you could point that camera at the performer and put it on any of the displays in the room as well. So I think that there's just a lot of flexibility there. I hope that that explains what my thought process was by talking about that on this slide a little bit better. It wasn't, whoever asked the question is anonymous, so I can't say their name. But thank you for that. I think it allows me to give you a little bit better information about what I was thinking. All right. So that's that. We have done it with 5 minutes to spare. And we're going to sort of just, I'm going to show these slides again. This is a new slide, but the next one you've seen before, is really just to understand that Q-SYS, again, we grew up as an audio company, but I really feel like with NV and with NVM, we actually have a video ecosystem that can work for you, that can do all the things that you're looking for it to do. And when you add our cameras into that, the network cameras that we have, the 5 camera models, all of a sudden, it's really completely flexible and sort of up to whatever your customers are looking to do in a specific space and whatever your customers are looking to do in specific spaces or in an entire building, and turning it into, again, that entire sort of full stack AV platform, full stack design, making it one single ecosystem so that you don't have to keep going to, again, different pieces of software to get what you need to get done for your customers. And we'll close with this guy. Our NVM series, again, we want to scale. We want to design natively, deploy faster, and make sure that everything we're doing, again, is within our fully integrated audio video control platform. We have about 5 minutes for any questions anybody may have. You guys have been suspiciously quiet all day with the questions, so let me know if you have any questions. I'll stick around for a couple of minutes. If we don't have any questions, we will conclude our proceedings here today. All right. I don't see any questions coming in. So either I've done a really good job or I've done a really terrible job, and I'm not gonna guess as to which it is. Oh, see, now there's questions. Let's see. Would you use NVM Designer after the initial setup? I would use it if I have to make changes. So if I'm going to be adding encoders or decoders, I might use it for that. If I needed to change a routing group, I might use it for that. So, you know, if you get a call from your customer, it's like, hey, there's this one event that we just did that we couldn't quite get the routing quickly and easily how we wanted it to be. I would might maybe go into Designer to maybe add a routing group or change a routing group or enroll different devices into different routing groups. So I would, it would be a real specific situation though. Hopefully that answers your question, Matt. All right, thank you. And I would like to take this opportunity. I know everybody, ooh, wait, another question. Stop, hold the presses. Will the decoders ever have dual outputs to work like a dock station and have an extended window or act like a multi-window viewer? At this point, Rudy, I don't know. We have not heard anything. I don't think that the decoders will ever have dual outputs. I think that's an easy one to answer. I think the idea is that we don't necessarily want to be working like a KVM. We want to do video over, you know, over the network, over big deployments. And there are, in fact, a lot of those types of KVM companies that have that market pretty well locked up. The extended window or multi-window viewer is a little bit harder of a question to answer. We get asked that a lot. We get asked about multi-viewer capability, being able to do, say, 4 images on a single screen of all 4 sources. And as of right now, we don't have that capability, but I feel like that's something that could be a future update or a firmware update that we get down the road. All right. Could you specify some use cases when you would design a room with the NV series over the NVM series and vice versa? I think it's a great question, by the way. I think where I would stick with NV series, so the NV32 and the NV21, is in that corporate application where it's a space that absolutely needs conferencing. And then also that space that also still needs you to have 4K resolution with AV bridging on top of that. I think that's where I would stick with the NV series. So if I had a lectern and I know somebody wants to be able to walk up and plug in a USB-C on their lectern, that's an NV21 all day long. That's where I would really stick with the NV series. And I would think even as big as a training room in a corporate application, I would still stick with the NV series. The only place where I might possibly inject NVM is if I wanted to have decoders at the displays. But remember that resolution change, if you actually want to have an NV32 be an NVM encoder, it drops the resolution to 1080p 30. So for me, if I'm in an conferencing heavy application that also I know I need to keep the resolution at 4K for all my displays, that's the NV series. If I know that I need to distribute video over long distances or long lengths of or different rooms, that's where I start looking at NVM. And I think that's probably going to be a distinction for a little while, at least until the AV bridging component of the NVM boxes is developed. Okay, I think that was, thank you, Isaac, for that. It was a great question. I don't see any other questions, and it is exactly 10 o'clock, so I'll take the last minute and thank everybody for being here, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you very much.